I am Anna, a successful art director, saw the world as a well-composed piece, and my life with Jack, a talented and charismatic architect, seemed to be its masterpiece. We weren't just a couple, we were an installation. A work of art that people looked upon with admiration, whose story was told as an example of true, cinematic love. Our dinners were like society receptions, our travels like stills from an art house film. Harmony, calibrated to the millimeter. My younger sister, Klara, was always my shadow, a restless and elusive sketch in the margins of my perfect canvas. An eternal rebel with disheveled hair and paint under her fingernails, she lived in my light, feeding on its reflection. I loved her with that complex, all-forgiving, and slightly condescending love only older sisters are capable of. I paid her bills when she was finding herself, yet again in a paint-splattered loft. I promoted her controversial, aggressive works in my gallery, introducing her to influential people who would wince but shake her hand out of respect for me. But I always felt her envious gaze at my back, sharp as a shard of glass. Especially when Jack was near. Klara looked at him with a poorly concealed adoration that, in my naivety, I dismissed as a girlish crush on her handsome, confident future brother-in-law. Sometimes she would make barbed remarks wrapped in the sweet guise of sisterly concern. Don't you think Jack works too hard for your comfort? He looks tired of all this glamour. Or maybe sometimes he just wants simple human connection, not your endless gallery openings and empty conversations about art. I would just wave them away like a bothersome fly. I was too happy to see the poison in her words. I was too confident in the strength of my design. Everything collapsed on a rainy Tuesday. A day that ripped all the color from my life, leaving only shades of gray. I was driving home in high spirits, looking forward to dinner with Jack. That morning, in his usual rush, he had forgotten a folder with sketches for a new exhibition he'd promised to finish for me, so I decided to stop by and pick them up. As I entered the building, I immediately sensed a foreign scent in the air. The faint but insistent scent of her perfume, heavy, musky, with notes of sandalwood and patchouli. The scent of bohemia and protest, so unlike my light, floral fragrances. I wrote it off as a coincidence, a whim of the draft. The door to our loft was unlocked. Inside it was quiet, but this silence was wrong, electrified. And then I heard them from our bedroom. Quiet, broken moans, and a suppressed laugh. It was her laugh, low and husky, a sound I had known since childhood. I froze in the hallway, feeling my heart not just plummet, but shatter against the icy bottom of an abyss. This was not the sound of passion I knew so well, not the music of our love. It was the sound of betrayal, dirty, sticky, and ugly. And through that laughter, I clearly heard my sister's voice whispering his name. I didn't storm in screaming. I didn't become the destroyer of the scene. Instead, a cold, ringing emptiness filled me from within, forcing the air from my lungs. In that moment, I think I stopped breathing, turning into another statue in our modern art collection. The world narrowed to a single point, the door to our bedroom, from which the sounds that were killing me emanated. Quietly on tiptoe, like a thief in my own home, I turned, pulled the front door shut until it softly clicked, and walked out into the pouring rain. The drops streamed down my face, mixing with silent tears. The world lost its color, turning into a blurry gray stain. In that second, the Anna who believed in love and family died. And another was born, a strategist of vengeance, her mind sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. I disappeared for 3 days. I rented a faceless apartment in a gray, residential district and turned off my phone, severing all ties. For the first 24 hours, I just lay on the uncomfortable sofa, staring at the cracked ceiling, letting the pain pass through me, burn everything to the ground. The memories that were once my treasure had become instruments of torture. Here is Jack, and I choosing the paint color for the loft. Here I am consoling Klara after another failure. And then, when the tears dried up and a scorched desert formed within me, an icy, crystalline rage began to grow in its place. I turned on my laptop. Its glow-in-the-dark room was the only source of fire. They must have thought I had run off to our parents in a fit of hysterics. Jack and Klara, caught off guard, probably even felt a perverse relief. Now they didn't have to hide. And I sat in the silence, the bitterness in my soul slowly crystallizing into a clear, flawless plan. I would not scream and break dishes. I would destroy their worlds. Slowly, methodically, stripping them of everything they held dear. My revenge would be a work of art. A cold, calculated performance. First was Jack. His career. His pride. His name. He was at his peak, leading an ambitious project for an elite residential complex, Heaven's Harbor. He often boasted to me about his business acumen, explaining how he saved on materials by substituting them with cheaper alternatives. The main thing is that the facade looks like $1,000,000. No one will see what's inside. He would laugh, and I would laugh with him, taking it for the cynical joke of a genius. I knew where he kept the forged quality certificates for the rebar and concrete in an encrypted folder on his computer. The password was laughably sentimental. AnnaJack 2106, the date of our first date. At night, when the pain was especially sharp, I got to work. My fingers flew across the keyboard, creating an anonymous email address. I wrote to a renowned investigative journalist whose articles destroyed reputations. I didn't just leak information. I compiled a complete dossier. Files, documents, contacts of disgruntled contractors Jack had once mentioned over a glass of wine. I seasoned it with hints of corruption schemes. The bait was cast. Next came Klara. Her art. Her desperate desire for recognition that ate away at her from the inside. Her solo exhibition, a scream from within, which I myself had organized for her, was meant to be her triumph. But I knew her greatest secret. Her so-called unique style was a brazen, almost frame-by-frame copy of the work of a little-known but brilliant, reclusive Dutch artist. I found his contact information through old university connections. I wrote him a letter full of feigned admiration and regret that his ideas were being so shamelessly exploited in another country. I attached the catalog of my sister's work and a link to the exhibition announcement. The outraged Dutchman immediately hired lawyers. But that wasn't enough. Using my connections, I arranged for the city's most ruthless art critic, nicknamed the Gravedigger of Reputations, to attend the opening. His expert eye could not fail to see the plagiarism. Finally, their shared future, built on my money. I had always managed our finances. Jack found it boring. In a few hours, with the cold precision of a surgeon, I transferred all the funds from our joint accounts, sold our stocks, and terminated the lease on our loft, informing the owner of their immediate eviction. I canceled all our wedding arrangements, meticulously explaining the true reason for the cancellation to every florist, photographer, and restaurant owner, adding spicy details. Let the rumors fly ahead of me like a flock of vultures. The evening of Klara's exhibition opening was the apex of my plan. I prepared for it as if for a stage entrance. A black silk dress that clung to my body like a second skin. Bright red lipstick, my war paint. The gallery was filled with guests, buzzing like a hive. I entered and dissolved into the shadows, by a column observing. Klara, in a garishly bright dress, was radiant with happiness, her eyes shining feverishly. Jack stood beside her, his arm proudly around her waist. They were sure they had won. They had stolen my life, and were now celebrating their housewarming. And then it began. First, a whisper rippled through the crowd, quiet as a snake's hiss. Smartphones lit up in the dim light. Someone opened the website of the city's main newspaper. The headline blared from the front page. Heaven's Harbor, or a house of cards. Architect Jack Miller accused of multi-million-dollar fraud, endangering hundreds of lives. I watched Jack's face turn white as chalk as his hand frantically reached for his vibrating phone. At that same moment, a devastating review from The Gravedigger was published on the most authoritative art portal. A pathetic parody, derivative kitsch, a scream not from within, but from someone else's catalog. And right after, blogs lit up with articles on the plagiarism, with side-by-side comparisons of her paintings and the Dutchman's work. The guests began to leave, casting disgusted, contemptuous glances at them. The festive atmosphere turned into one of a public execution. And then I stepped out of the shadows. I walked through the emptying hall, and the click of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the deafening silence. I stopped right in front of them. Jack rushed toward me, his face a pathetic mask. He started stammering something about a terrible mistake, about not being himself, about being sorry. Behind him, Klara was sobbing, smearing mascara across her face, turning into one of her own caricatures. I looked him straight in the eyes, and he recoiled from the cold and emptiness in my gaze. "I loved you, Jack. I built a life with you, brick by brick. And you, sister. I shifted my gaze to Klara, who shriveled under it. I trusted you. You both took my world and burned it to the ground. This is merely the ash I am returning to you. Enjoy it. I turned and walked away without looking back, leaving them amidst the ruins of their lives, in a hall hung with the evidence of their lies. Months passed. I left the country, selling everything that tied me to the past. I heard snippets of news. Jack was facing lawsuits and bankruptcy. His career was destroyed. Klara became an outcast in the art world, her name a synonym for plagiarism. Their great love, unable to withstand the weight of shame and poverty, drowned in mutual accusations. Revenge didn't bring me wild joy, but it gave me a sense of completion, as if I had placed the final period on a long and ugly sentence. It wasn't sweet. It was bitter, like medicine that, nonetheless, cured me of the poison of betrayal. One day, sitting at a cafe on the Amalfi Coast and looking out at the dazzling blue sea, I received a letter from Klara, forwarded by my parents. It was long, full of pathetic excuses and pleas for forgiveness. Without finishing it, I burned it in the flame of a candle on the table. I watched as the flame consumed the words, turning them into black, weightless ash that the wind carried away. Upon my return, I bought a new apartment with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean and a huge, 3-meter-tall white canvas. I stared at it for a long time, at that flawless, radiant emptiness, full of infinite possibilities. My past had been erased, and the future was a blank canvas, on which I alone would now paint my picture. And in this picture, there would never again be room for lies or shadows. Only light, color, and my own, hard-won freedom. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left, and thank you for watching.